Hi there, my name's Chad Skelton. I'm a university instructor at Kwantlen Polytechnic University, just outside Vancouver. I also teach at the University of Florida. And like many instructors, ChatGPT has been a bit of a nightmare for me these last few years, dealing with all sorts of cheating, people getting ChatGPT to do their entire assignments. But I've also really enjoyed playing around with ChatGPT, and I've recently discovered that it can be a really effective tool and an ethical tool to help tutor students and help them to understand concepts, help them to prepare. And I've actually been helping my own children who are high school students use ChatGPT in a way that I think is ethical and incredibly effective at helping them to understand concepts better, do better on tests and quizzes. And I wanted to walk through some of the techniques that I've been using in the hopes that you can find it helpful for yourself or for your own kids. Or if you're an instructor, talking to your students about ways in which they can use ChatGPT in a way that will help them to understand the material as opposed to getting it to do their work for them. And I have to say that I was inspired by a blog post and some videos by Ethan Mollick, who's a instructor at the Wharton School at the University of Pennsylvania. And in particular, he wrote a piece back in June about specific prompts that you can give ChatGPT to help it behave in certain ways, to help you as an instructor come up with test questions. But the one that I was really intrigued by was using ChatGPT as a tutor. And he actually included a fairly long suggested prompt that kind of tells ChatGPT how to behave and how to sort of check for understanding and things like that to sort of encourage it to act in kind of a tutor capacity. And recently, ChatGPT introduced this new feature called custom instructions. And if you go on your account under custom instructions, you can tell ChatGPT two things, sort of who are you, and then what do you want it to do? And I find this to be incredibly helpful because, you know, this incredibly long prompt from Ethan is helpful, but for it to work, you need to remember to paste it in first anytime you're doing a chat. What's nice about these custom instructions is you can set these up for your kid, and then anytime they use ChatGPT, it will keep that context in mind. And I find that works a lot better for using ChatGPT as a tutor, because then once these custom instructions are in place, your kid can just load up ChatGPT, start asking it questions, start asking for help, and it kind of understands the context of who your kid is and what they need to learn. So I will paste these into the discussion or the description for this video, but essentially what I've done in the what would you like ChatGPT to know? I've sort of explained, I think the key thing is sort of what level your student is at. So I've said I'm a high school student. I've included a location here of British Columbia, Canada. One of the problems I've found with ChatGPT is it often will bias towards American answers. And obviously if you have a student in British Columbia, or you have a student in England, or you have a student in Australia or New Zealand, you're going to want ChatGPT to kind of tailor its responses to things that are relevant to your location. So I include that location. I include the grade level that the student is in grade 10, what they want to use ChatGPT for as a tutor, to help me understand concepts and to help me prepare me for tests and quizzes. And then just letting them know that they use a flashcard program called Brainscape, and I'll talk about that in a little bit more later. This part about how would you like ChatGPT to respond is heavily influenced by Ethan's suggested prompt. Unfortunately, it's too big for this box, but I've just sort of tightened it up, sort of saying, please be a helpful, friendly, and encouraging tutor, explain concepts in a simple way, test my knowledge to see if I understand things, only ask me one question at a time, give me explanations, guide me in an open-ended way. If I'm struggling, give me additional support. Once I show an appropriate level of understanding, given my learning level, ask me to explain the concept in my own words. This is the best way to show you know something, or ask me for examples. Okay? So with that in place, you can then just start asking ChatGPT questions. So you could say something like, can you explain to me the causes of World War I? And ChatGPT will start giving some explanations, some point form notes here. And then it ends with, now can you explain in your own words what you've learned about the causes of World War I, right? And so you can have this sort of back and forth conversation. One What I found to be the real killer app here, though, when it comes to tutoring, is it's obviously a little bit hard, especially if your student is not a great fast typer, to get them to do this kind of back and forth typing. But the new ChatGPT app actually allows you to have a conversation with ChatGPT orally, and I found this just to be a game changer when it comes to tutoring, because if your kid is having trouble understanding a concept, they can just load up their phone and just sit there and have a conversation with ChatGPT and help them to understand concepts. And I found it to be really good at checking for understanding, explaining things in a clear way, that kind of thing. And I'm just going to demonstrate this, and I'm going to do my best to play the role of a grade 10 student who doesn't yet understand this concept. So we'll play around here, and I'm going to try to get it to explain to me Japanese internment. One thing that I'll sort of mention to my kids as well is you want to kind of remind ChatGPT that you want things in a Canadian context. The custom instructions help here, but if you're asking about something like Japanese internment and they are living in British Columbia, Canada, you're going to want them to understand what happened in Canada, not what happened with Japanese internment in the United States. So let's go. Hi there, can you explain Japanese internment in Canada to me, please?
Of course. Japanese internment in Canada was a historical event during World War II. The Canadian government forcibly relocated and interned around 22,000 Japanese Canadians, most of whom were citizens in internment camps. This happened due to fears of potential espionage and loyalty to Japan. Imagine you're living in British Columbia during that time, and suddenly the government forces you to leave your home and live in a camp far away. It was a challenging and unjust experience for Japanese Canadians. Now, can you explain in your own words what Japanese internment in Canada was?
It was discrimination against Japanese people.
You're absolutely right. Japanese internment in Canada was indeed a form of discrimination against Japanese people. They were unfairly treated because of their Japanese heritage, which is not right. It's essential to understand the historical context and learn from these past injustices to ensure they don't happen again. Is there anything specific about this topic you'd like to explore further, or any questions you have in mind?
Were Japanese people killed in the camps?
Yes, unfortunately, some Japanese people did lose their lives in the internment camps, although not as a result of direct violence. The conditions in some of these camps were very harsh, with inadequate housing, food, and health care. This led to health issues, and some people, particularly the elderly and vulnerable, did not survive these difficult circumstances. It's a sad part of history, and it highlights the importance of treating all individuals with fairness and respect, regardless of their background. If you have more questions or want to discuss any other topics, please feel free to ask.
So I found this to be to work quite well, and in particular, I've noticed in my own kids' use of this, if they don't understand a concept, the ChatGPT tutor does a pretty good job of kind of getting them back on track, sort of gently correcting their mistakes, things like that, and it can be often a really helpful way for them to understand the concept. Now, obviously, as parents, we should also be having those conversations with our kids about what they're talking about in school. But if you're like me, like sometimes the topics in some subjects are ones that I am unfamiliar with, and it's a bit hard for me to get up to speed really quickly. I mean, one of the nice things about ChatGPT is it knows, it seems to be almost everything, and it can kind of draw on a whole bunch of different types of knowledge. The next part is the flashcards. And so I've been using with my kids this app that I quite like called Brainscape. And I did a bit of research about sort of what were the best sort of virtual flashcard tools. And the free version of Brainscape is pretty functional. You can create flashcards, and then you can either do them on your computer or you can do them on an app. And one of the nice things about the way that Brainscape works is it kind of keeps track. You essentially get each flashcard and then you self-assess yourself about how well you answered the question. And then it will kind of rotate the questions in such a way that it kind of gives you some that you know, so it builds your confidence, but then it gives you more of the questions that you're struggling with, as opposed to kind of going through the same 20 flashcards over and over and over. And it's got a nice organization system where you can organize your flashcards by class, and then you can, within each class, have certain subject areas, and then you can either just search on that subject, you can be tested on that subject area, or you can do all of them. So it works really well in terms of sort of these unit tests throughout a semester. But then at the end say, test me on everything because I've got a big final exam or final test coming up. But one of the challenges that I've found with the flashcards is that it's harder than I realized for a high school student to kind of come up with good flashcards, right? So they've done the readings, they've paid attention in class, but then sort of that synthesization process of like, how do I take 4 or 5 paragraphs about Japanese internment and ask really pointed questions that test my understanding is something that has been a challenge in our household. And so, either, our kids are writing flashcards that aren't really super on point, and so they're not really testing their understanding, or we as parents have to spend an enormous amount of time getting up to speed on the subject and then writing these flashcards. And most of the things that kids are learning in school are pretty general knowledge stuff, like World War I, World War II, geometry, things like that. And so ChatGPT can be quite helpful in producing those flashcards. And I'll just give you an example here. So we're talking about Japanese internment. If I sort of say, please write me 6 question and answer flashcards about Japanese internment in Canada. Okay, and you can just copy and paste those flashcards, right into Brainscape. And you can see it's these sort of nicely synthesized flashcards. Why did the Canadian government intern Japanese Canadians during World War II? It was out of fear and prejudice. Now, I'd probably, be nice if they sort of mentioned the Pearl Harbor thing there. Oh, but then it sort of mentioned here, when did Japanese internment begin in Canada? In 1942 after the attack on Pearl Harbor. Where were they sent? Various locations, including British Columbia. How long did it last? What were the consequences? It does a pretty good job of, finding the key essential points on a particular topic. And I'll just do another one here. Please write me 5 question and answer flashcards about the causes of World War I. And it's actually added here sort of an explanation. And I found this kind of it can be helpful. But again, the sort of back and forth tutoring works here well, that you kind of want to encourage your kid not to jump straight to the flashcards, because then they don't yet understand it. And you don't want them to kind of have that just sort of, I understand a couple of key facts. So that kind of starting with that back and forth conversation, understanding the concept, but then moving to the flashcards and synthesizing it can be really helpful. Now, this works great as long as the topic is generic enough that ChatGPT can create those flashcards. But obviously, in some cases, either the thing you're learning in school is extremely specific, or the way in which it's being taught is particularly specific, and you want to make sure that you're learning it in the way that the instructor intended, and that if you're being tested on what you've been taught in that particular class on that particular topic, that your flashcards are going to prepare you well for that assignment. And I found, again, ChatGPT to be pretty good at this. I'll give you an example from one of my own classes. So I teach data visualization at Kwantlen, and I've got 3 handouts here about what I teach my students about data visualization. So I've got a handout that says just say no to pie charts, and talks about why pie charts are often not a great way to visualize data. I've got another handout about why you should always start your bar charts at 0. And then another one about how you choose the right chart for the job, right? So that certain types of charts work better for certain types of information. Okay. Now, this sort of follows broad data visualization best practices. So I could probably get ChatGPT just to say, write me some flashcards about data visualization best practices. But, my advice as an instructor, for better or worse, might be a little bit different than the kind of common received wisdom about data visualization best practices. And if you're in my class, I'm going to want you to answer the way that I've told you how to do it, right? So what I really want to do in this case is I want ChatGPT to make me some flashcards based on these handouts. And I found it can do a pretty good job. So let's just do this, and I'll just write, please write me 10 question and answer flashcards based on the following text from handouts in my data visualization course. And then I'll just do some quick copy paste. Now, obviously, that's going to miss the images, which are pretty important in this one. So it's not perfect, but we'll see how it does. Do this one here. And this one. Okay, let's see how it does. Okay, a lot of text. Flashcard number 1. What is the main issue with using pie charts for data visualization? Pie charts become difficult to interpret when they have more than 2 or 3 slices. That's a key point that I make in my lectures, that I make in that handout. Why is it challenging to compare multiple pie charts? It's difficult to make comparisons between multiple pie charts, especially when trying to identify the largest slice. Let's move down here. What should your chart be able to do even with the numbers removed? Your chart should make sense and convey meaningful information even without the numbers. And this is a concept that I talk about in class on the handouts. It's known as the self-sufficiency test, which is something Kaiser Fung came up with, which is the idea that when you remove all the labels from a chart, the general gist of what the chart is saying should still be clear. And that's a good way to assess the effectiveness of a chart. What's the key to effective use of color in data visualization? Use color sparingly to draw the user's eye to important information and ensure it aligns with the key points in your chart. Again, another really key point that I make, don't overuse color in your chart. And then what is the most important consideration when visualizing data? Always ask compared to what? Data gains meaning when compared to similar values, benchmarks, or previous values. That's a quote from Edward Tufte. It's how I end my very first presentation in data visualization, a really key component. So it's not perfect, but this does a pretty incredible job in pulling out the key essential points from those 3 handouts and coming up with 10 concise, clear flashcards that test the student's knowledge of that material. You can also, if you don't have a PDF of what you're doing, if you take, like, this is just a picture of a page in a textbook. Google Photos has a lens feature, and the Apple Photos app, both of them have some OCR capability. So you could do that OCR capability on here. And then again, much like I did with the handouts, copy and paste that into ChatGPT and get it to make a handout based on that specific page in a textbook. If you have the paid version of ChatGPT, ChatGPT Plus, GPT-4 actually allows you to upload documents. So you could use that to upload PDFs of handouts. You could use it to upload a reading. And it also has some limited OCR capability. I find it's not great. It can only really do sort of 2 or 3 pages at a time. But if I actually, grab that screenshot of, the Massey Commission, and I'll just remind you what that looks like. So that's just a picture of a page in the textbook. And I just say, please summarize what's on this page and write me 3 question and answer flashcards on the topic. Okay, so it says the page you've uploaded appears to be from a textbook discussing the protection of Canadian culture with a focus on the Massey Commission's role. Now again, ChatGPT 4 is more powerful than the free 3.5. It's also a little bit slower, but it's doing a pretty good job. And maybe what I'll do is I'll just I'll fast forward this. Okay, so that takes a little bit of time because ChatGPT 4 needs to think a little bit harder. When I'm using ChatGPT 4, I often do it while I'm doing something else, just because I find it's a little bit slow. So I'll kind of ask it a question, go check my emails, come back. And if I made you sort of sit through this, you could sort of see how slow it was going. It would have been sitting here probably for about a minute or so. It wouldn't have been super exciting, but you can see it does a pretty good job of first summarizing, what this page was about. It was about this commission that was established by the Canadian government to protect Canadian culture from American influence. It led to several measures, including the creation of the CBC, the National Film Board, the Canada Council for the Arts, and the Canadian Radio and Television Communications Commission, and then some flashcards. What was the main purpose of the Massey Commission? What role did the CBC play in promoting Canadian culture according to the Massey Commission's recommendations? And how did the Canadian government support the arts following the Massey Commission report? And I won't go into all the details here, but I'll say I've played around with this quite a bit now, and obviously working with my own kids. And it's kind of amazing. You could imagine these answers being just from the general corpus of knowledge that the ChatGPT has about the Massey Commission, but they're actually very specifically based on what is actually in this page of text, right? And if you actually looked at that page in detail, you would see that the questions and answers are specifically geared to what is on that page. And so you can get, so really what we're talking about here is sort of two things. One, you can kind of just, have a conversation with ChatGPT, gain understanding about particular concepts back and forth. You can get ChatGPT to make you flashcards on generic topics. Or if you have specific course materials, you can say, I want you to, explain to me what's on this particular page, and I want you to make flashcards for me on what's on this particular page. And I found this just to be quite incredible in really helping students to understand material in a way that if they were just to read the textbook or take notes in class, they might not get. Allow them to create relatively quickly, really effective flashcards that test their understanding. And I think this is just a really effective and ethical way to use ChatGPT. I don't think this is any different than, having a really good tutor for your kid or you playing that role of a really good tutor. But it just allows your kid kind of whenever they're struggling on a particular topic, just load up the ChatGPT app and start a conversation. Like, I don't understand this. Can you explain this to me? And it works, pretty well. Now, to circle back to the beginning of this video, as an instructor, I've been dealing with a lot of cheating with ChatGPT. And I think if you're going to get your kid to use ChatGPT in this way, you need to have a really serious, clear conversation with them about what's okay and what's not okay with ChatGPT. Because, once they start to see how good of a job ChatGPT does as a tutor, it's pretty darn tempting just to sort of say, please write this essay for me, right? And I find that, a good rule of thumb is anytime you're copying and pasting from ChatGPT into something that you're then submitting as your own work, that's not okay, right? If you're using ChatGPT to help you understand the material better so that you can write a better essay, so that you can do a better presentation, I think that's great. I think it's not that much different than all of us Googling when we don't understand something, but is often a much more effective way of getting a handle on a topic than Googling. But I think you really need to be clear with your kid about, what's okay, what's not okay, because you obviously don't want to be responsible for introducing them to ChatGPT and then, them getting in trouble with their teacher for cheating. But in a way, I think, we'll have to see how we navigate this going forward. But I think if we can start to accept that there are legitimate uses for ChatGPT that can help us in the learning process, my hope, and maybe it's somewhat Pollyanna-ish, is that might make the bad uses of ChatGPT less tempting, right? So if ChatGPT can help you to understand the material in a way that you can succeed on your own, then maybe it's a little bit less tempting just to let ChatGPT do everything for you and not learn the material. So I've been pretty impressed at what this can do in terms of tutoring and helping my kids understand material, and I'll keep on playing around with it. And as I discover new things, I'll post new videos. So I hope this has been helpful to you. And if you have any thoughts on or suggestions about ways to use ChatGPT to help kids learn things, please put them in the comments. Thanks very much.